The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Hello, I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and welcome to Benchmark. We'll explore a variety of issues involving our justice system and our legal system and how they intersect with the citizens of the town of Colonie. Today, we are truly fortunate to have as our guest Supreme Court Judge Thomas Breslin. And welcome, Judge. Thank you for coming here today.
My pleasure to be here, really.
Well, I know that the town residents are well familiar with your capacity as a jurist and as an attorney as well, and we're so lucky that you could share a little time with us. There's no question that this brief show, could ever do justice to your background and experience and your practice of law here in Albany County for so many years, and we're so happy that you could be here today with us. Judge, there's so many ways that you and I intersect in a variety of ways, and I know that you were born and raised in Albany.
Correct.
And certainly found your way to Boston College, and I followed you just a few years after. And I think we both have children that have graduated.
And we're lucky to have both kids go there also.
Yeah, and it's certainly blooming in so many different ways, and I have a daughter there right now as well. And it's a very successful operation, no doubt because they had students like Joe Teresi and Tom Breslin at one point.
And Ed Spain.
Yeah, that's right.
Our other retired Supreme Court judges.
And so we're so lucky. And of course, after Boston College, you attended Toledo Law, and of course was editor-in-chief of their law review. And Judge, after graduating, did you come back to Albany right away, or what did you do?
I was torn between a couple federal clerkships that I've been offered, and I was fortunate to get an invitation to be a law clerk at our appellate division here in Albany, and I decided to come home. It was a one-year clerkship, and then after that, was a staff attorney adjunct at Albany Law School and helped create the Albany Law School Legal Assistance Project, and feeling need to really get out and practice. It coincided with Sal Greenberg being elected district attorney.
Yep.
And because I'd done a lot of actual trial work in law school, the Ohio trial practice rules were very liberal then in terms of allowing students to do it. I was able to walk in day one with Sal and be one of his 4 people in his felony trial bureau, and got to try a lot of cases with some really wonderful people. Sal being just the best person you could ever work for.
Well, all of us have rallied around him. He was a guest here on Benchmark some years ago, and of course we were all together for a luncheon on his behalf recently too, sponsored by the Albany County Bar Association. And he continues to be so thoughtful and helpful in connection with the practice of law. He's really a symbol of how things have happened here in Albany County, and the right things.
Yeah, and he's just such an incredibly classy person, and so morally upright, and that's an accurate description, because when you work for him, just do what's right.
Right, exactly.
And he gave you the authority, but also you'd never want to disappoint him, because he really set high goals and set the standard, in my eyes, the gold standard for what a district attorney should do.
And of course, Judge, not only did you serve in the district attorney's office, but also in the public defender's office and in private practice.
Right.
But your experience in the district attorney's office, no doubt, was the beginning of your focus on felony trials in so many different ways. And in those early years in the DA's office, I bet you were involved in a lot of trial work at that point.
Well, back then, the jurors came in for a month at a time. So you'd be picking juries Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I think in 2.5 years I did about 40 trials, which is remarkable. But the way things ran, I can still recall a Monday morning where I was picking a jury with one of our judges, and 11 o'clock or so, the guy decided, no, I'm not going to continue on pleading guilty. And the judge said, well, who's up next?
Yeah.
And they said, well, I am. And he said, well, we'll start picking on 1 o'clock. We started picking, and 4 o'clock, that guy changed his mind, pled guilty.
Right.
And he said, who's up next? He said, I am. And he said, well, you only have to pick a jury tomorrow. You can start the proof on Wednesday. And it really was a trial by fire.
Right.
I don't know as I would want to replicate that today. I think that people should be given a little more time to prepare their cases, but it did force you to learn to be ready at all times, and it was a good learning experience.
And Judge, you told me something earlier today about the value of working in a DA's office and the value of what a lawyer should be doing and what our justice system should be doing. And what is that you tell students today?
I talked to young DAs and I said, you're never going to have a job where I think you'll enjoy more and have a more pure mission. I said, your job is to find the truth. It's not to get a conviction, it's not to get an acquittal, it's to find the truth.
Right.
And if you do that with all your zeal, if the person gets convicted, so be it, you've done what's right. If they're acquitted and we found the truth, you've done what's right. And it really is that simple. And I don't think I've ever had a job but the mission was so clear.
Well, Judge, even as a young lawyer, you distinguished yourself in the courtroom, and you were recognized by local private practitioners who eventually came to you and asked if you would join with them. Is that how the next step went?
It was we had discussed, I was trying a case against one of the senior criminal trial lawyers in the area, Paul Cheeseman, and we were at a break after the trial, and he said, well, how long are you going to be in the DA's office? And kiddingly, I said, well, I'm waiting until you offer me a job. And he said, you want to have lunch next week? We did, and shortly thereafter I became a member of the law firm of McDermott and Cheeseman, where it was a wonderful practice. And eventually my co-judge, Steve Herrick, also practiced, and a legendary law clerk, Peter Porco,
Yes,
was also a member. And it was a nice practice, a good group of people, and I learned a lot of lessons.
And eventually, and subsequent to that time, you joined with your brothers, didn't you?
Well, we'd each been partners. I became a partner with McDermott and Cheeseman. My other brother Michael was a partner at DeGraff Foy, and my other brother Neil was a partner with Gary Cale, Edmonds, and Breslin. And we decided we'd like to try to maybe get our hands on the wheel ourselves.
Yes.
And in 1980, we joined and were in practice for 10 years. And it was a great experience. The two people I trusted most in terms of my life and my close friends, it was a nice way to practice law.
Well, I've had the good pleasure of having your brother Neil on this show as well, and he has said exactly the same thing as well. And ultimately, each one of you found your way into full-time public service, and in a variety of different ways. Certainly, Mike and you as well, and Senator still presides in that capacity. What was your first position on the bench, and how did that come about?
In May of 1990, the state legislature created a new family court judgeship here in Albany County because of the numbers of new cases that were coming. I was fortunate enough to be nominated for that position by then Mario Cuomo, the governor, and was confirmed and was in the job within 6 weeks of its creation, and then ran for that job that fall,
Right.
and was elected to a full 10-year term. And had the pleasure of working with Tony Cardona and Bev Tobin, who were the two family court judges then.
Right. I remember as a young practitioner going into the family court building, which was really on the opposite corner of St. Mary's downtown. And I appeared before Judge Cardona in one of my early practice days in that building. Yeah. Which was an old school itself, as I recall.
It was. I think it was St. Mary's.
Yeah.
And thank God the facilities are slightly better than they were then.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, I think that the court system may own that building now, is that, or the Court of Appeals?
Court of Appeals owns it, and they use it for records and other things.
Yeah, but that's where I first. I was in that building in the early '80s.
Yep, with Judge Tepedino and Judge Cardona.
That's right. And then you were on the family court for a few years, and then an opening appeared in the Albany County Court?
Yes. Judge Keegan retired, or Judge Keegan moved up to Supreme Court, and an opening occurred, and I ran for election in November of 1992. Won that election, served there in 2002, ran for re-election, and served 9 of the 10 years on my second term, so I was 19 years on the county court. Given my criminal history, I loved what I did in family court because I really thought I could make a difference for kids. And that's really what family court's about, making sure that we do the best for our kids. That was a wonderful opportunity, very taxing opportunity, because that is an emotionally draining job if you take it with the seriousness you should. Because every kid there is, you may be the last person to keep them on that path that might lead them to a successful life. And if you didn't do it with that kind of fervor and zeal, then you ought not to be there.
Well, Judge, certainly your ascension into the county court position, which put you squarely into the criminal law, and has certainly was an extension of some of your prior work and trial work. You were already an accomplished trial attorney, and your experience in the Albany County Court certainly has rendered your reputation throughout the state of New York as without parallel in presiding over criminal cases, which has been a great benefit to the citizens of Albany County and to the entire state of New York, because you've been asked to go elsewhere to preside over cases in other municipalities, including New York City, to help them and bring your competence and on the road.
Nice. And it was a challenge. It was an interesting challenge. It made you realize you can learn something new every day, and you do face new hurdles when you go to New York City. I don't envy the judges in New York City because they have institutional hurdles that we don't encounter. Getting a defendant on trial out of Rikers, you can't get them in court till 11 o'clock. Well, that's an awfully difficult position to put a judge in, especially when you have to close court at 4:15 in order to get them back to Rikers. And there are other institutional problems that are just, because it's New York City, it's so large, it's so hard to manage. I've also had the chance to try cases, I think, in every county in this district. For 16 of the 19 years, I supervised all the criminal courts in this 7-county district, and was responsible for making sure, everybody had the help and assistance they need. And sometimes, if a judge runs into an 8 or 10-week trial, which you do, it's hard to stay current with all your other matters. So you need to move your resources in to help back up that judge.
Right.
And that gave me a further opportunity to be in other courts and encounter new circumstances, and it really was beneficial.
Well, Judge, your capacity to manage and help direct resources remains recognized by the court administration. Even now, you are our administrative judge for the 7-county area through your Supreme Court capacity.
Right. That happened just a year and a half ago. The administrative judge really is the person responsible for the administration of all the courts, from Supreme Court to the town and village courts, county, family, surrogates, and to provide the assistance to our judges, whether he or she, whatever their need is, whether it's a new computer, whether it's a laptop, whether it's some new cameras, whatever the circumstances are, we're there as a resource to make sure that court is running as efficiently as possible. And it's a challenge every day. And but our citizens deserve no less. Well, you continue to shepherd our court system here very effectively.
And so many of your celebrated cases during your county court judgeship certainly made not only statewide news, but some national news as well, in connection with some of the either the fact pattern or the law that was generated, or the state legislature's reaction to cases that you had in front of you at the time. And one that comes to mind is what we now refer to as Jenna's Law, and that really emanated out of a matter that you presided over. I think it was People versus Pryor. Is that right, Judge?
It was. It was back in the late 90s. It was a murder case where if you looked at the defendant's criminal history, you'd wonder how in God's name he was ever on the street to start with. And the victim's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Grieshaber, it was Jenna Grieshaber was the victim's name. And these parents were devastated, and they took it upon themselves to lobby the legislature to bring forces together to change our criminal justice system with regard to how we treat violent felony offenders, that they must go to jail. If you're determined to be a violent felony offender, you're going to go to jail, and the minimum sentence on that is going to be 6/7 of what you do. What they used to call truth in advertising. Not that, you get the sentences 2 to 10. How much did you do? Well, right. Under the new violent felony offender statutes, if you get 7 years, you do 6 of it. And I think it was a smart change. I think it was a well thought out change by our legislature to accede to what the Grieshapers really focused the light on.
Well, that certainly had an impact, Judge, and I can imagine that there were a variety of cases that in a trial setting that take quite a long time. You were telling me about one case when you were presiding in our county court, which actually had no less than 60 witnesses in connection with a murder trial. And I'm just wondering, how many days did that take, Judge, and what was that? What was that about?
It was a 4 or 5 year old murder case where the victim had been found along the shores of the Tomahawk Reservoir, and the state police and a couple investigators doggedly pursued that case, including Jimmy Horton, a senior investigator, and they just by, it seems, sheer will, they just kept working and with the assistance of our Albany District Attorney's Office, and finally cobbled together a case, just piece by piece by piece by piece, and then put it together, and it was a totally circumstantial case, and when it all got put together, it made sense, and he was convicted, and he's fortunately for the rest of us doing life in prison.
Yeah, Judge, how long would a case like that take?
I think it took 2.5 weeks.
Okay. Would that have been is that one of the longer trials that you presided over, or have you had longer ones?
I think I've had one longer.
There
was a shooting case with 2 police officers, a rather celebrated case, right around the turn of the century. I'm quite sure the appeal's finished now, so I can speak about it.
Okay, well, that's all right. Yeah.
And the second counsel was brought in from Chicago. He was the deputy head of legal aid in Chicago, was the second chair for the defense attorney, who she subsequently was State Defender of the Year. And it was a very, very celebrated and tense trial. Several rulings came out of it. The police obviously standing by their wounded brethren, and a couple of police officers did get hurt very badly. Showed up in the courtroom wearing the blue uniforms, and you had to make a ruling. Said, no, you can show up, but we can't allow the police intimidation. That would be wrong. You have a right to be here as a citizen to support your fellow officers that were hurt, but we can't make this a coercive atmosphere, and that was a difficult proposition. Many people didn't understand that, but it was important that the precedent be followed.
Well, Judge, the criminal calendars are exceedingly busy at all levels, and of course, the Colonie Court, as of 2014, is ranked the 22nd busiest criminal court of fingerprintable offenses in the entire state of New York. So we're seeing it very much at the local level, and your capacity to preside over felony trials is certainly well recognized. And during your time as a county court judge, and now currently as a Supreme Court judge, I imagine the majority of the cases that you preside over are still criminal in nature.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because of taking on the roles of administrative judge, I've had to cut back on my trial work, and I think I do the criminal work probably more efficiently than the civil work. So I now have half a normal criminal calendar, which is a challenge, but I still love it, and it allows me to stay in the courtroom, which I love to do.
Well, Judge, is it fair to say that you've presided over 400 felony trials?
Yeah, hard to believe a young fellow like me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's 400 plus.
Wow. You know, and you've created, it's actually your presence and your capacity to, having presided over so many trials, makes it exceedingly efficient, even for the general public, because you're able to, you're ready to go. If they need a felony trial, you're happy to oblige and preside over it efficiently and effectively.
Yeah, I think that you know you have to set certain parameters with how you act, and you know, certain people think that a judge is there to just move cases along. Well, that's not true. Right. I mean, it's unfortunate given the number of cases we have.
That's right.
We must plea bargain.
Right.
There's no question about that. I mean,
I understand that, Judge.
A few years ago, I think I resolved 600 felony cases. I did 25 or 26 trials, but that still left 575 cases to be resolved.
Right.
Well, if you offer those people, well, plead guilty and I'll give you the maximum, very few are going to plead guilty. Right. None.
Right.
So you have to decide who it is that you're going to give a plea bargain to, and I think most judges, and we've discussed this because I'm very active in our state association, who would you be least likely to give a deal to? A murderer, a rapist,
right.
someone that's committed a violent crime. Right. I mean, I've had defense attorneys come in and on a murder case and say, what's the offer? And he says, 22 to life. Mm-hmm. They said, well, that's not much of an offer. They said, well, it wasn't supposed to be. They said, you know, I don't think the people in this community, when they have a judge respond to a murderer, want him plea bargaining. They want to make sure that their streets are safe, and a person who's committed the most atrocious of acts has a very, very severe sentence attached to it. With that, unfortunately, you have to decide which cases you must plea bargain.
Right.
And they're the nonviolent ones. And you have to do that to dispose of them. And Lord knows what the number of cases that you have to I mean, right. I assume you probably have 50 to 60 new cases a week.
Right.
Well, people can't comprehend,
Yeah.
I can't comprehend the number of new cases that you must just process,
Right.
let alone adjudicate.
Right.
It's sometimes it's a daunting task.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And, you know, and sadly, judges, you and I both recognize the courtrooms are full. And I believe that the best courtroom is an empty one. But and it's not just our criminal calendar in Colonie, which is taxing, but we have a civil part too, which continues to be very active, where we're being asked to settle disputes and put people back together. And there's a lot in there that we're always after at all levels. Our court system is being stretched.
Well, you know, the other day we had a group of town and village judges over at the training center in the administrative office, and I went down and spoke to them, and I really meant it when I said, you know, you are in the trench judges.
Right.
You're out there. You don't have a law clerk who you can walk back and say, let me run this by you and get some instruction. It's 10 o'clock at night. you got the problem staring you straight in the eye, and you've got to make a decision. And I said, no one else is there, it's you.
Right.
And the fact that it may be a misdemeanor or something doesn't make it any less difficult to resolve, because sometimes those, maybe neighbor versus neighbor, are the most difficult cases to bring some kind of measure of justice to. I mean, if someone commits a murder to me and they're convicted, I mean, it's not too hard to decide what should happen.
Right.
But the cases in the town and village courts, I think, bring so much more pressure on the judge to bring justice, because it's I think, not, maybe slightly more elusive.
Well, we keep at it, and you know, certainly Colonie Court has its own challenges, and we need to meet them in a variety of ways. And I continue to advise our legislative body about where this court has been and where it should be going, and that'll be an ongoing effort on my end to continue to do that. Judge, have you seen, you've been in private practice, you started with, you were in the appellate division, which is a great honor, by the way, for a young lawyer to serve in our appellate division. I had Judge Peters here just last week, and I can tell you, I know that it is a great honor to serve. He served in the public defender's office, in private practice, and of course in a variety of judicial capacities. Have you seen the practice of law here in Albany County or in upstate or even downstate change, evolve in certain ways? Is there anything unusual that is different now than it was when you started?
We talked about, you talking to Stu Jones about this several months ago, and part of it, the change is because of the number of cases that come through the system.
Right.
I mean, when I was a young lawyer, the year before I became a lawyer, our county court judge, there was one, and this has sat for 10 months, and they took July and August off. I mean, the idea that a judge would have the ability to take 2 months off now is, and now we're at 3 full parts in our criminal courts when we had maybe 5/6 of one part back then. The numbers just continue to grow. The answers continue to be elusive. I mean, as we talked before starting, so many of our cases are drug-driven.
Yes, that's
I mean, they may not be pure drug cases, but they are drug-driven, whether it's a larceny, a burglary, whatever it is.
Is that addiction underneath, Judge? Yep.
And, you know, and I agree with your number. I would guess, at a minimum, 75% of every cases have that drug underlying element to it.
I agree, Judge.
And until we get a handle on that, we're not going to get a handle on our criminal justice system.
I know. I see that, and I tell young students who come and visit my courtroom all the time that I recognize the issue. I want them to know that addiction's a big issue, and it's also costing taxpayers a tremendous amount of money to manage those addictions as these people actually end up in the criminal justice system. Many times routinely, many times 40, 50, 60 arrests in their adult life, which is becoming par for the course over here in Colonie. And it's addiction driven when you're arrested that many times. It's and the processing that takes place, and all of the taxpayer support network for those particular defendants. I think, you know, I let these young people know that, you know, they need to figure that out, or it'll just keep growing at a geometric rate and taxing our court systems.
But I think some of the specialty courts that we've established are meaningful, and I think they are working. I know we have a drug court here in Albany County that Judge Herrick leads exceptionally well. And the recidivism rate is very, very low compared to other places.
Yes.
He also runs the DWI part of that drug court. He also runs a vet track, as it were.
Yes.
And to me, that's a very critical part. And with Judge Peters' help, we're going to be, and really not her help, with her inspiration, we're going to be looking to do more and more of that, because she's committed to seeing where and how we can expand upon that idea. Because, we have kids coming back from, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, or whatever, having suffered greatly while defending our liberties. And they get into a situation because of whether it's post-traumatic stress or whatever, that they commit an act which is a crime. And somehow we have to reach out to them. I mean, if not if they're a career criminal, that's not the story, but I mean, we have individuals that we want to help along the road who have just committed a crime, period. They're just plain Mr. Citizen. But then we have another person who's given of themselves. They've gone to a foreign land, have donned the uniform voluntarily, and have seen combat, and they come back, and because of that combat, they're suffering some situation. Boy, if we don't stand by them and do something to assist them, then shame on us. And with Judge Peters at the head, I think, and Judge Colonie is going to be part and part of which he always is. This is going to be something, hopefully, in the 7 districts we're going to move forward.
Well, that'll certainly be to all of our benefit. And Judge Tom Breslin, thank you very much for taking your time to be with the Colonie residents today. When I look at the past 25 years in Albany County and recognize what you've done on the bench and continue to do serving in our judicial branch, and also having your brother Neil here as a state senator, and Michael serving on the executive branch as a county executive here in Albany County, I can only imagine that when the historians come and write the history of the Albany County public service over the past 30-year cycle, the chapter will be called the Breslins. And thank you.
Hey, thanks. I mean, I may be overstated, but I'll tell you, we each have tried to do the best we can with what we've got.
Well, it's a very special story to have 3 brothers do everything you've done. And thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. It was really fun talking. This time went very quickly.
Yes, it did. Too quickly.
Yeah.
I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and thank you for joining me on Benchmark.